he was certainly from a family that was very rich. He was certainly one of the American elite. But he was Roman Catholic, and that was a problem in America. In America, the Deep South, the southern states, were extremely important for anybody who wanted to be elected, and they were predominantly Protestant. And there was a great fear at the time in the 1960s, actually it goes right back in American history, back into the 19th century, that Roman Catholics couldn't be trusted. Roman Catholics couldn't be trusted because they would take their instructions from the Pope and not from the American authorities. So the idea was that if you elected a Roman Catholic official, somehow you were putting the papacy in control. And that's something that we'd recognise in Northern Ireland. It wouldn't be a problem today in America. For example, Mitt Romney recently ran for president. Now, he failed, but he ran against Barack Obama, and Mitt Romney is a Mormon. So for many Christians, that isn't even a Christian religion at all. Mormons would claim that they are. But the fact that a lot of evangelicals and a lot of Roman Catholics wouldn't even recognise Mormons as Christians, yet Mitt Romney, as a Mormon, could run for president, is to a large extent due to JFK. JFK was a Roman Catholic. He knew that he had to break the mould. And the extraordinary thing about John F. Kennedy is he knew how to bluff, and he also knew how to grasp a challenge, to take a bull by the horns. What Kennedy did in his presidential campaign is he actually accepted an invitation to the Greater Houston Ministerial Association. That's not, doesn't sound particularly big, but what essentially would happen was he would give a speech to 300 Protestant ministers, exactly the sorts of people that wouldn't trust a Catholic president. So there were 300 Protestant ministers in the room. Kennedy addressed them, and the press would be there. The fact that John F. Kennedy was going in front of an audience of 300 ministers, Protestant ministers, to talk about what he would do as president. And while he didn't convince the majority of the people in the room, the majority of the people in the room liked him. John F. Kennedy had something called charisma, charisma, charisma. And the idea of charisma is that it's almost as if the politician stands for something bigger than just themselves, bigger than just their party. And we'll come to this again in a moment, but Kennedy was selling a new image of America, of a new deal for Americans. He was the future, he wasn't the past. People in the room liked him. But what he offered was an argument. He basically said that there was no reason for Protestants not to vote for him. He said, "I'm not the Catholic candidate for president, I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president who happens to be Catholic. I do not speak for my church in public matters, and the church does not speak for me. So I'm not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate who happens to be Catholic. I do not speak for my church in public matters, and the church does not speak for me." That was quoted through newspapers right the way across America. He said, "I believe in America where the separation of church and state is absolute." He said he believed that in America where a Catholic cardinal or bishop could not tell a Catholic politician what to do. And he also believed in an America where Protestant politicians couldn't tell people how to vote. And people accepted that message. This is very important in American history, that the church and the state should be kept separate, that the American government shouldn't back any one church. So there's no equivalent of the Church of England in America. And what Kennedy was doing was saying, look, that's the America I believe in. I believe in the America that was set up by our founding fathers centuries ago. This is the way America was always meant to be. And if you're going to tell me that a Roman Catholic president shouldn't take orders from the Pope, I agree with you. He shouldn't. But then Kennedy has them. He says, if you're going to tell me that a Roman Catholic can't accept orders from the Pope, well, neither should a Protestant minister be able to tell his congregation how to vote. You can't have this both ways. You can't tell me that I can't take orders from a bishop and then say, but you're allowed to tell your congregations who they should and shouldn't vote for. You've got to be consistent. And he pushed this argument through. Now, that's an important moment in American history, because at that stage, it became absolute, that it became just accepted that really politicians shouldn't be going to the church to hear what they should do. And there's been a huge disagreement in America ever since. So it's an important moment in American history to understand America today and to understand the rows about abortion and about what marriage means. This goes back to Kennedy pushing forward this argument that politicians really, when they're a politician, they should be leaving their religion at home, they should be leaving their Christian beliefs at home, and they should just act for the good of the people, for the majority of the people. And some American politicians agree with that and some disagree with that. There's disagreement on it today. But that's an important moment, Kennedy's speech in Houston. But the other thing that it did that was it completely broke the mould. It meant that Kennedy was elected. Now, by the narrowest of margins, Kennedy was barely elected. He just, squeezed through, but he got there, and he became the first Catholic president of the United States. And now today, people wouldn't think twice about voting for Roman Catholic. In Northern Ireland, there would seem to be a lesson there that if you're going to say, well, you can't trust the other community because they belong to a particular religion, and you can't trust that other religion, well, the logic would seem to be, well, they shouldn't trust us either. And we maybe do need to take a leaf out of Kennedy's book and begin to ask ourselves the question, well, to what extent should we allow church and politics to mix? To what extent should we be allowing churches to tell people who they should and shouldn't vote for? But we'll leave that to one side, because your essay is really going to focus in on explain Kennedy's successes. It's not going to ask you to talk about Northern Ireland, but just keep that in mind. So the first success Kennedy has as president is to be elected president. And he's elected president as a Roman Catholic, and that changes things in a huge way. There's no longer just white Anglo-Saxon men who become president. He's also a young man who's become president. He's not one of the older guys who generally got the post and who'd been hanging around party politics for years. He's new and he's youthful. And this leads to really the second thing we want to say about Kennedy. He understood that America had to sell itself to the world. And to do that, he wanted to sell America as being young and new and energetic. So when he accepted the presidency, his inaugural speech, he said, let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch is passed to a new generation. He told people not to ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. He said that the American people would bear any burden, that they would accept any price to defend human rights around the world. And what he was doing is he was giving America a mission. He was like a preacher. And he was saying Americans stand up for more than just business, more than just lining their pockets. Americans want to defend human rights around the world. And Americans are about sacrifice. Now, you might want to compare President Kennedy's speech to George W. Bush's speech after the Twin Towers collapsed. After the Twin Towers collapsed in America, after the 9/11 attacks, George Bush made a speech saying Americans should just go around there just behaving as they had before, that they should go to Disney World, that they should spend their money, that they should go shopping. There was no message there about sacrifice. Kennedy stands up on his first day as president as he swore in and he says, listen, America is about sacrifice. It's about asking what people can do for their country and then asking what can our country do for the world. He set up two projects. The first was called the Peace Corps. And the Peace Corps was young people would come forward and volunteer to go round the world and to help out in really charitable organisations and help poorer parts of the world, to act as ambassadors from America. And this became an incredibly popular idea. Many young people, after hearing John F. Kennedy speak for the first time, signed up for the Peace Corps. And he also created something called the Alliance for Progress, because he looked at South America and he seen the incredible poverty there was there, and he realised that communism could get into South America. So he set up this Alliance for Progress, which was a little bit like a Marshall Plan for South America. And over the next 2 years, he would put in $1.5 billion into South America to try and raise living standards. So what he's doing is he's giving America a mission. We're going to make the world a better place. We're not going to do it the way the communists do. The communists, when they try and make the world a better place, send in tanks and bombers. America is going to send in volunteers, and it's going to send in money. This is how America makes the world a better place. So he says Americans will bear any burden to protect freedom around the world. And America doesn't ask what its country can do for the people. It asks what the people ask, what can we do for our country? So he makes America mean something important. And that gave Kennedy incredible power. It gave him incredible political influence. It made him somebody who was likely to be re-elected. The third thing he does is he invests huge amounts of money in the space race. Now, to some extent, putting a satellite into orbit doesn't seem to be the best, use of American money when you can spend that money on tanks or bombers. But there are two things that work here. First of all, if you can send a rocket into space and get that rocket to fly right the way around the globe, well, there's no reason you can't attach a nuclear missile to the tip of it. Now, the Russians seem to be getting ahead in the space race. They were putting satellites into space ahead of Americans. And that scared Americans because they thought, well, maybe the Russians are going to get better missiles than our missiles. So there's a military side to this. But there's also a message, and Kennedy understood that. He understood that countries around the world were going to go with a nation that had the best technology. And so he didn't want Russia to look as if communists had the best technology. He didn't want it to look as if the USSR was the place you wanted to be if you wanted to be on the cutting edge of science. He realised that America needed to look like America had the best scientists. And so he put huge amounts of money into NASA. He set up the goal of putting a man on the moon. Now, he wouldn't live to see that happen. But the fact was that he set that goal. He set America this huge scientific challenge. And it made America look like America was the place to be. America was the way of the future. So his first success was simply becoming president as a Roman Catholic. His second success was giving America a mission, giving America a place in the world, giving America a message that could challenge the message of communism. Communists would get into countries and would try and take those countries over to say, we're going to make the world a better place. Kennedy gives the American people a different way. He says, no, we're going to send in volunteers, we're going to send in money. This is our mission in the world. However, Kennedy's greatest successes were certainly in foreign policy. And although part of the reason he was so great in foreign policy, in other words, in his dealings with Russia and in his dealings with other nations, one of the reasons that he has this success is that he can motivate Americans, he can give Americans this mission. But a lot of it can also be traced back to his first and greatest failure, and that's the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. Now, that was a nightmare for Kennedy. Kennedy comes into power, and a guy called Fidel Castro has taken over in Cuba. And there's no doubt that Fidel Castro rebelled against a very, very corrupt regime run by a guy called Batista. And Castro kicked Batista out, and people in America reckoned, yes, this was great, this was a fine thing to do. There were very few people in